one of the most powerful subjects or themes in art and life is death, and we have not yet looked at that in terms of African art. So let's take a look at O'Reilly's Figure 7-1, which is a series of masked dancers wearing Kanaga masks. This mask is used by the Dogon people, located in West Africa, largely in Mali. The Kanaga dancers literally dance the souls of the dead to the afterlife, moving them from deceased human beings to honored ancestors. So elevating the position of the dead to the realm of ancestor, but also bringing harmony back to the community. These are head crest masks that are used in performances, and I'm talking about music and dance, which is incredibly athletic and acrobatic. It is a dance that today still is used, but I'm going to say mostly for tourist attraction, maintaining perhaps a portion of its earlier meaning, but not the entire meaning. The original use of these masks was in a festival, a funeral rite essentially, the Dama, D-A-M-A, funeral festival or rite, that took place over a series of days. And in the beginning stage of that dance performance, the dancers were incredibly disorderly, combative, and running all over the place, representing chaos and disruption. And the reason for that is that their dance patterns at that point represent the pain, the chaos, the suffering, the disruption in society that occurs when someone actually dies. Okay, over the course of the days that follow this, the dancers very gradually begin to form steadier lines until we see what we have up on the screen right now. An orderly procession that literally leads the dead to the afterlife and brings about order again to the community. At the same time as this is taking place, the community is allowed to grieve, to go through the grieving process, and feel the sense of pain and loss that is a part of the experience of death. Okay. The Dogon carvers create about around 80 different types of masks. This is, I would say, the most famous of the masks that they do produce, and this one in particular is associated with maintaining and establishing or reestablishing order in the community, maintenance essentially. Okay, the Kanagas in this slide are in the center. We have two animal masks flanking them, and those animal masks would have been worn and used in the chaotic dances at the beginning of the process, indicating a kind of wild nature of confusion that required a transformation and a return to stability, allowing at the same time the community to actually express their grief. To the uninitiated, let's take a closer look. Hey, these are two of the Kanagas. The one that's on the right is located at the Penn Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. This has a double cross superstructure with a vertical running and connecting the two, I'm going to call them realms. To the uninitiated, and by uninitiated, I'm talking about a secret group that would have learned the symbolism of the mask and learned how to dance the mask. As you are on the outside of this group, you would have been given the information that this represents perhaps a bird with its wings outspread in flight, or perhaps a mythic crocodile. Once initiated, however, you begin to learn that this is actually a cosmic design, with the top bar representing the sky and the lower bar representing the earth, with that vertical as an axis between these two realms. In other words, appropriately referencing death and transformation from one realm to another, a kind of cosmic shape that would allow the process of the dance to help to restore balance in the world and allow for release within the community. These masks, again, are danced. They are part of performances with music, using art objects as tools in a sense, the objects not being created simply to be viewed and appreciated for their beauty, but being stored, in fact, out of view when the dance performance was not being enacted. These are also tools that would help spirit to enter the body of the dancer. As that spirit helps in the act of transformation, these objects would have been considered very powerful and very much out of the ordinary, allowing the community to have a great sense of the power of the process of transformation, bringing something otherworldly to that dance. The pigments that are placed on these are organic, and I would like to bring your attention to the fact that there is white kaolin. So these pigments, in fact, do have to be refreshed because they're kind of fragile. It's said that the white references the afterlife and the spiritual with a kind of luminescence and a kind of purity associated with it. The red can be a reference for power, for danger, perhaps for blood. I like the idea of it being associated with transformation. The black traditionally is said to represent fertile soil, think where the dead are placed, and to also specifically reference death. And altogether to give us a sense of ideas of transformation, successfully finding a way to cope with the trauma of death. Okay. A review. African art can generally be classed as cool or powerful. It is often understood through pose, and the poses are standard, so that they become a shorthand for a very complex interpretation. Also understood through expression, particularly the expression of the cool. There are universal proportions that appear in African art as well as poses, and materials that are continually used and convey, along with the surface treatment. And think of the Kanaga mask, headcrest mask. That carries white kaolin, so that the materials and the colors are universally understood to have powerful meanings, and therefore can easily serve the purpose for which they were created. Okay, my next couple lines: traditional African art was made, and this is pre-colonial, to serve a purpose, and it was aimed at social, religious, and political harmony in this world. In other words, maintenance, falling into the line of maintenance, practice, and religion. Okay, of my purposes that I've listed, number one, harmony with the spirit world. I think we can put death into that category. We could also put the Chiwara and the communication with agricultural fertility spirits into that category. Okay, we've also hit number three, enforcing laws with our power figure. And number four, learning and reinstating or restating social values and teaching through the proverbs of the Asante. That leaves us with number two, which is strengthening political power, and African art also successfully is used for that, which we are going to see specifically in probably three separate cultures that appear in Nigeria or the region of Nigeria. The heads on our lower right are images from those three cultures. In the area of Nigeria, there are a series of cultures, three in particular, coming in sequence. The oldest of these is the Nok culture. And those are, I think, O'Reilly's dates that I've included up on the slide that we're looking at, going back as far as 500 BCE. The Nok might even go back further than this, but it gives you a little sense of the age. The Nok provides, I think, a foundation, maybe even qualifies as a mother culture for the region. And the works that are produced may indeed be associated with harmony, maintaining harmony between the living and the realm of the spirits, and also, I suspect, with maintaining political power. And I'll try and explain why I think that in a minute. Okay, the Nok culture is one of the earliest to leave us significant works of art, particularly in terracotta in West Africa. The heads that are produced, we're looking at one on the left, that is in O'Reilly figure 710. And we're looking at a full figure located in the Louvre, which is on the right part of our screen. These figures represent some of the oldest work that has survived in Africa, quite logically because it is terracotta. I'm sure that wooden objects were being created at the same time, but those have long since perished due to climate conditions that would destroy wood fairly quickly, not to mention the termites. The region had iron smelting, and that might in fact be one of the sources of wealth for the people. The Nok culture, which is named for a site, the place name, Nok, a city, where the first heads were discovered, and I'm using in quotes, discovered by the West. In 1928, on the Jos Plateau, it was a tin mining operation which was under the control of the British. And as the process of tin mining went forward, some of these heads began to emerge as early as 1928. In 1943, near the city of Nok, while mining operations were going forward, several of these heads began to appear. One of the workers, a local person who was working, found that one of the heads, and believing it to have power because of its age and the fact that it came from the ground, took it and used it as a scarecrow, essentially, to protect his yam field, where it was, I think the traditional explanation is quote-unquote successfully used for a year before archaeologists became involved and recognized the significance of these figures and began to do research on them. In 2005, the Germans officially and systematically began to field work, and hopefully out of the work that they do, we're going to have a better understanding of the Nok culture. We do get radiocarbon and thermoluminescent dating as a result of this work, and it ranges somewhere from 2,000 years to 2,500 years old in terms of the age of this culture. So it's pretty impressive. Certainly among the oldest civilizations that we find in West Africa, and as I'd like to suggest, perhaps a mother culture for the high civilizations that follow it. In terms of the style, and if you look at the head 710 on the left, it might be easiest to see. These images that survive often are the heads, large heads, very close to being life-size. Once upon a time, they were attached perhaps to a full figure, and I do have one full figure located on our right. These were made by coiling. They were not mold made, so they were made by hand. One of the diagnostic features of style is the triangular shaped eyes, which have been pierced very deeply with an incision, a round hole, creating a very powerful looking figure with mouth open as if they're speaking, but certainly adding to the power of the subject. These have an abstract quality, but also suggest a strong observant quality. In other words, the artist is looking at images that he is creating. The noses are also pierced and maybe flared. We'll see one that is in a moment. The forms tend to be rounded, sometimes swelling. They also have incised lines that were produced in the surface of the moderately wet clay, giving us simplified, very abstract, but very powerful. I'm going to suggest perhaps rather direct depictions. We have these mostly as fragments. They're hollow creations. They're broken. They washed out of their original context, either perhaps through the mining process or by natural means, by floods, by rains. So unfortunately, as of yet, we do not have information to tell us exactly how these would have been used. So unfortunately and sadly, I can't tell you with certainty what the purpose of these images were. I can tell you what the appearance of the images suggests. The figures, I think, are depictions of elite members of society. If you look at the one on the right, you can see an elaborate hairdo, and that's always an indicator in African carving, and in this case modeling, which would suggest status. In addition to that, there's jewelry worn around the arms, I think, and also around the neck, and that too would be a reference to the status of the individual. So it is very likely, a number of things have been suggested, but I think it's very likely that these are depictions either or both of ancestors and or political rulers. And that is the way that we're going to discover Benin later in this region used images. And I'm just going to try and extrapolate back from Benin to Nok culture. Again, I can't guarantee that that interpretation is correct. It is here very early that we can see there is a stress on the large head of the figure. Traditionally, and I'd like you to look at the Louvre piece, traditionally throughout the continent of Africa, there has been a fairly universal feeling that the head is the seat of personality, the center of knowledge. If you want to think of it as the essence of the person or the soul, please do that. But consequently, the head is enlarged and ends up being somewhere a quarter to a third the size of the object that is created. The clay also, before I forget, on the left tends to be very, very gritty. That's another one of the diagnostics for Nok, along with the triangular eyes. Originally, we understand that there was a slip that was placed over the surface, and these were burnished, but there is very little of that that survives today to take a look at. Okay. This is another example, and this is also a map showing you the region of Nok culture. This helps again, and this is a fragment. We don't have the whole figure, but it does help to suggest the importance that was placed on the head. This is a female figure, and I've got a side view as well as a frontal view of a female created in the Nok culture coming out of Nok. The flaring nostrils of this one would give us at least a sample, slightly different from the one we last saw. But again, the very elaborate hairdo that is a part of this. I would like to suggest that both males and females are treated fairly equally, different in elements of design, but they are given what appears to be equal treatment. On the continent of Africa in general, genders tend to be approached as if they are separate but equal. We see it early in Nok creations. We see it in Chawara carvings where there's a male Chawara and a female Chawara. And we also see it in the continent, generally speaking, with male figures and female figures that both appear as seated figures. In other words, that are given elevation within the society. These are additional Nok creations. I don't want you to think that they're just human heads. We've also found fragments of elephant, like we see in my detail on the left, with those ever-present and very powerful triangular shaped eyes that are pierced by a circular hole. The image below is one of these figures being released from the earth after it had been discovered and found. And the image that is up above in the top right is a snake that would capture and kill by constriction, and it has coiled around prey, an object that it wishes to consume, dinner in other words. Okay. This is a slide that I show to you, not necessarily a pleasant subject, but it gives you proof that Nok images, however simplified, are actually carefully observed. They reference observations from life, and this is a photo of a constrictor who is essentially suffocating his prey and then will be able to consume it. A very impressive civilization, culture that we think will pass on some of its ideas to the people who come after it. And that will in particular for us be the Ife culture.